Hi everyone, welcome to the Early Career Podcast. This is your host and friend Priyanka. Thank you for joining us on this episode. I was really thinking about what I wanted to do next. And so this is the topic that came to mind, which is something that I've been hearing a lot about lately. Actually, not lately, this is something that I've been hearing about for the last 9 years that I've been at AWS for. And just someone reminded me of this lately, and it's called BLUF. It's not what you think it is. Like, it's not a lie. It doesn't mean a lie. It means it's called BLUF with one F, not two Fs, right? So, what is BLUF? Let's dive into the problem statement before we answer that question. Have you ever been in a situation where, you have your manager asking you about like the status of a project, or, you're in an interview and you're being asked a question about, a task that you accomplished or a project that you handled or led or whatever that is, right? Or maybe you're just writing an email to your company, to your team, someone sharing an update about something, right? And have you found yourself in situations where you're just kind of rambling? And this happens more so in interviews because you're like in that high stress environment, right? And I mean, it's happened to me a lot of times, right? I would ramble and I would almost intentionally not want to get to the point because I would feel like I was so underconfident that I would feel like if I got to the point, maybe they won't like the point, so I'm just gonna like keep talking, and maybe if I talk more, then people will think I know more, right? But that's not at all true. Talking doesn't make you automatically look like you know more. It might make you feel like that in your early career. If you're a student, and if you talk about, like, let's say you have a project, you're being asked to talk about that project in an interview, and you just think that you want to share every single detail of that project. Sure, all those details are valid. I'm sure you put a lot of effort into it. But let's say that you feel this need to share every single detail with the interviewer because you put a lot of effort into it, right? So first of all, I want you to separate the effort and what you did, which is very valid, justifiable, all of those things, from what the interviewer in this scenario wants to hear from you, right? And what they want to hear from you is really what you did, how that impacted the company, or how did that bring revenue in some shape or form, or how did that improve performance, cause some outcome or some output goal, right? And then they want you to elaborate a little bit more on, okay, how did you get there, right? And so that's what we call BLUF, or bottom line upfront. So bottom line upfront means that, you are stating what you would traditionally or ideally state as the last sentence, your conclusion, which is the bottom line. So now you're going to state that up front. So the top, we're going to flip the narrative from, story all the way to outcome, flip it. So outcome, then the story. And that's what we call BLUF, right? Bottom line up front. Now, there are scenarios where you'd want to use this, and there's scenarios where you would not want to use this. And I'll walk you through both. And this is my own opinion, right? Feel free to change it, mold it according to how you feel best. Because again, all of these professional opinions that you get from my podcast or really any content out there on social media, please make sure that you take that opinion, take that feedback, recommendation, but then you make sure it's yours in the end. You know what I mean? Like that it has your flavor of who you are. And that's what I always do. Like sometimes, for example, I've heard some leaders, VPs, saying, oh, you know what, like just state bottom line up front. Right? And they say it as though you're supposed to do it in every scenario sometimes. And that sounds, I kind of challenge that in my head because I'm like, no, I don't fully agree that you should just use that bottom line upfront theory in every scenario, because there is definitely power in storytelling. There is power in creating an emotional sort of pull before sharing the final. It's like a trailer, it's like a movie trailer, They don't give away the end or the conclusion, right? At the beginning of the trailer. They kind of walk you through this emotional journey. And then even in the movie, they kind of walk you through an emotional, suspenseful journey, right? So that, your emotions sort of build up, and then you're like, okay, like tell me more. Oh, I want to know more. And then finally you are hit with the conclusion, right? So in movie, for example, in the movie industry, this will not work at all, right? Because directors are going to be like, wait, our whole job is to create a story that is capturing the audience and keeping the audience from start to finish till the conclusion, like till the bottom line in their world, right? My view is that I kind of combine those two worlds in the sense where I truly believe in the power of storytelling, strong storytelling where you hit the right points, you focus on the right emotions, you create the right momentum. If you're able to do those things, then I think you can strike a balance between bottom line upfront and not doing so much of that. But there are certain scenarios where, for example, if you're like in an executive meeting, or you're maybe having an executive one-on-one conversation with a mentor maybe, or, again, it's an interview where you don't really know what that person wants and what that person's like. Because there are some VPs or there are some executives who do appreciate the story, and then there are some who saying who are more like, yeah, just tell me what you need kind of thing, right? More sort of to the point. And both of those approaches are okay. There's both kinds of people in the world, and that's completely fine. That's their personal preference. It's also how much time they have, how much time they want to invest, how much time they want to prioritize on you. Maybe they don't invest a lot in person A, but they do invest a lot in you because they believe in you, so they want to hear your story. So many different variations of this and so many contexts of this. But what I want you to focus on is the fact that, and the reason why I'm sharing this bottom line up front in this episode as a main topic is because, even during interviews or any conversation, the concept just forces me to think about, as I'm kind of going through the story with my manager or someone, I start thinking, wait, why am I actually sharing this story? What is in it for the other person? And what are they going to get out of it, right? So I start to like subconsciously question myself as I'm going through the story. And that's the middle ground or the balancing point that I would say is because at that point you still are telling a story, but you're also kind of like telling yourself, okay, wrap it up, right? And that's equally important because neither do you want to sound like a robot. At least I don't want to sound like a robot. So even if the other person doesn't necessarily like a story, I will tell, even if it's a short story, I will start with a story because I believe in the power of my storytelling. Now, if you're not good at storytelling, share in the comments, and I'm happy to put another episode out there to share with you what good storytelling should look like. How do you engage with an audience? Even in a one-on-one, like how do you keep someone captivated to your journey, your message? Right? That's a whole other skill, guys. I won't go into the details of that right now. But what I will say is that when you start to communicate clearly with executives, with managers, with people are watching, by the way, right? People are watching for the next best talent that they want to get into their teams or into their companies. People are always watching. If you're working in a company, this is for people who are working in a company. In fact, this is even for people who are who are studying. People are watching your LinkedIn post. People are watching what you're doing passively. You may not think that because, maybe you don't get any likes on a post. So now you start assuming, oh, you know what, nobody cares about what I'm writing. Nobody cares about what I'm posting. But influence is built quietly, and you have to have the patience to build that influence quietly. So keep being patient, but believe in yourself and know that some people are passively watching. And I'm saying this with this much confidence because I've actually had personal experiences where I've had VPs, observe my work from a distance and actually talk to people in their circles. And actually, my name was then brought up in conversations where then hiring managers reached out to me saying, hey, your name was brought up in this room and in this conversation, in this context, I want to get to know you. So now they are also approaching you with this perspective of they want. And this sort of happens passively. I've been at AWS, Amazon for 9 years now, and I can assure you that happens. It's just that you have to be, this is not, again, this podcast, this episode, none of this is for, I don't want likes, followers. I don't care about followers. I don't care because, I'm not trying to make viral content. Because unfortunately, right now, the way social media works, the way content creation works, it's all about virality, right? But what happens, one of the downfalls of virality is also the fact that it's good for the person who is getting viral because of that content, but the content may or may not benefit the viewer long term. Maybe it's a short term dopamine hit, you feel good. Not to say that there shouldn't be feel good content. Of course, there should be feel good content, but I would say balance the feel good content with content that actually helps you rewire your brain, and follow people who actually help you think critically. Critical thinking is something that requires IQ, intellectual understanding of things, right? So think, learn, follow people who help you, who give you the tough love, right? Who give you the, the reality check, not just people who make you feel good, right? You can do both, but again, have it in balance. Anyway, coming back to bottom line up front. So I've kind of written down a couple of examples that I wanted to share with you to give you a more clear understanding of what that would look like in a real scenario, right? So let's say this is a status update. You're giving your manager a status update about a project, and your manager asks you, so hey, Priyanka, how is the project going? And most people would answer something on the lines of, oh, so we've completed the design, engineering is still working on one feature, QA has, a few bugs, marketing started preparing content, and we're waiting for legal approval, blah, 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 right? Now, the BLUF version, bottom line up front version, is this project is on track for launch next Friday with one risk around legal approval. You see, that is a conclusion of or the outcome that you are targeting. And then you can continue saying, by the way, engineering is complete, QA has resolved some major issues, and legal is expected to review that tomorrow. When you share it in that way, the person already understands the intent, and so they are not bothered by the fact that now you're sharing the story, because they're like, oh, okay, I get what you want to say, and I get the intent. So now tell me the story, right? But if you start off the other way around, people might be like, oh, you know what is it that you're trying to get at, right? Like, tell me what is that you actually want, or give me give it to me straightforward kind of thing, right? So people can get annoyed with you, and that is a poor communication, poor way of communicating, and that also builds low trust with the person, because now they don't trust in your ability to communicate clearly, succinctly, to communicate in a way that is just enough, where this is also something where you are respecting the other person's time by not just looking so self-obsessed that you just feel the need to share all these details just because you worked on it. Sometimes because we've put so much effort into something, we feel justified in sharing all those details, right? As I said in the beginning of this episode, you need to separate the emotional component of your effort and the actual outcome, which is for the business. The emotional aspect of things is there, obviously, and that's why I always suggest people having mentors and friends, but specifically mentors, because then you can share with them like, hey, I did this and I did that and this happened, and they'll be proud of you to hear that. They'll want to know that. That is the audience that would want to know that, right? Your friends, your colleagues, people you can trust outside of the context of someone asking you a question. And if you want to know more about how to create those strong networks, you can watch my previous episode with Derek Doer, and you will find a lot of tips. Actually, Derek was my first mentor ever when I started 9 years back at AWS. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. But please, separate the two things, because business outcomes are very different than effort and emotions, which both of them are equally valid. I will never ask you to invalidate your emotions, but find a different place for it. Now, example 2. Let's say that you are writing an email. Now, without BLUF or the concept of BLUF, you're going to say, hey, Sarah, I met with a vendor yesterday and we discussed several options. We reviewed pricing, timelines, implementation requirements, technical dependencies, and after comparing everything, I think blah, blah, blah. So by now, Sarah is still wondering at this point, wait, what does this person actually need from me, right? And so the BLUF version would be, hi, Sarah, I'd like your approval to move forward with vendor A by Friday. Then, next line, after evaluating 3 vendors, vendor A offered the best balance of cost, implementation speed, impact, long-term support, etc. Could you let me know if you're comfortable proceeding with this? So you see, like, you structured it with the bottom line upfront, which is what you need, then a little bit of the context of why you need what you need and what happened, and then asking a question, ending with a question, which if it's relevant, you can end with a question, because that also prompts the other person to respond faster. It's a subconscious sort of psychological component when you write emails and when you end it with a question. It makes the other person, it creates urgency of response as opposed to just writing an email. Because, I remember when I was like 25 and I just started my career at AWS, I would write emails and my biggest accomplishment would be, oh wow, I wrote an email. I wrote a good email, right? Because I didn't even know how to write a good email, an effective email. So I would just write an email, and sometimes my emails would be so long and I would be like, wow, I wrote a long email, yay, And now I look back and I'm like, maybe I could have done it differently if I knew this concept of BLUF, right? BLUF. So that's why I'm sharing it with you. Hopefully it's, helpful to you earlier than it was. So now let's move on to the next and the last example, which is in interviews. And I think this will definitely be relevant to everybody who's watching, whether you're in your early career, you're a student, you're in your first job, second job, mid-career, whatever, right? So the interview question goes, tell me about a time that you influenced a stakeholder. So many candidates will usually start with the background. I was working on this project, then there were 5 teams involved. I worked with this team and then that team did this and so, right? Instead, the BLUF version is, I successfully aligned 5 stakeholders by creating a shared roadmap and weekly decision reviews. And then everything else that you say after that, like how did you do it, becomes sort of supporting evidence or context. And you know what? I also like this approach a lot in interviews, because when you start with just the conclusion, it it's kind of like a hook, because now you're telling the interviewer that, hey, if you want more, feel free to ask me, right? And so the interviewer will definitely ask you, oh, so tell me more, how did you actually align 5 different stakeholders, and what kind of roadmap did you create? So it's almost like you are leading the interviewer into that next question, which is the question that you wanted anyway, right? So it's a great interview technique, but it's also a great way for the interviewer to know that you speak clearly, you are outcome driven, you are focused, you have clarity of thought. And that's very important. Now, as I said earlier, there are areas and situations where I do not like using BLUF because I feel like it's robotic, and there are different executives and people who are senior professionals who might suggest that, like BLUF is just the way to go. I personally don't believe so. Again, you can feel differently, and I highly encourage you to have your own opinion, but have your opinion which is grounded in some sort of experience or some data or some, maybe your outlook for life. Maybe you see it differently. Maybe you're a different personality. You have a different personality type. I am someone who loves talking. I'm someone who believes in the power of my influence. So I like creating that emotional connect with people, right? So for me, I think you shouldn't be using BLUF when you are when you are brainstorming, or when you're mentoring someone, or you are you are talking to a mentor, or maybe when you are sharing something sensitive, right? Like a risk, you don't want to start off by saying, oh, you know what, this is gonna suck, or the potential risk is so high, here's why. No, I think you want to kind of ease people in when you're giving some difficult information, right? So especially if it's sensitive, difficult, or if it's just like more of a conversation, brainstorming kind of thing, right? Recommendations, things like that. I think you definitely want to ease people in to that conversation. So you don't want to start off with like, okay, yeah, here's the thing, right? But so now here you as the person who's watching this has to finally decide whether it's a situation where you feel like telling a story is actually going to make the most impact first. So telling the story first, or telling the story second in the last, right? At the end, which is more impactful? And this depends on the context. This highly depends on the person that you're talking to. As I said, a lot of people, some people, they like hearing the story. Some people, they just want to know, tell me what you need. Okay, done, bye, right? So play somewhere in the middle is what I would say. And be conscious of this concept of BLUF, and keep gauging the person you're talking to. And that's what you call emotional awareness, right? Emotional intelligence is when you play off of other people's expression, the person you're talking to. Don't just start rambling and just saying. And when you find yourself rambling, I think that is the moment where this is the most effective, right? Because you're like rambling, and you stop yourself in the middle, and you're like, oh my God, this is going out of hand. So then you can be like, oh, so you know what? So what I really wanted to say was, then you can state the conclusion, right? So you can kind of bring yourself back and save yourself from going into like a rabbit hole by bringing the conversation back. If you remember in your mind as to, why am I sharing this information? Is this useful? Is this adding any value? Or am I just sharing this because I'm so emotionally charged about the effort I put into this? Anyway, hopefully that was informative for you. Again, I highly encourage you to enable your critical thinking, challenge yourself. After listening to this, think about what is it that you want to do differently? How is it that you want to structure the conversation? And if you find a different approach than what I've shared, please add it in the comments so that other people can see it and they can learn. Because what I'm trying to create through this podcast is, as the name suggests, it's called the Early Career Podcast, right? And the reason I created this is because I want people to feel, especially in their early career, not to feel alone, and to feel like you all belong, that you have a community, a platform where you can share and support each other. Because when I was in my early career, I think that was the loneliest time, and I think that is lonely for everybody, because that journey is something that you never expect. Usually society tells you, right, that okay, after 10th grade, after 12th grade, life is set. Then you get into undergrad, you realize, oh my God, there's more shit. Then you're done with undergrad, you think, oh wait, now I'm going to start working, so life is going to be set. And then you start working, and then you're like, oh my God, there's more shit. So, I hate to bust your bubble, but I think when as shit gets more real, you want to make sure that you have a support system, that you're not feeling alone, that you are able to find a community that validates your emotions. It's very important, because if you don't have a place for venting or a community to support, then you're going to be emotionally bleeding on your coworkers in a professional environment, and that is going to be detrimental to your career long term. So that's why I want to create this safe space, at least hopefully a relatively safe space where we can, people who are students, people who are in the early career, or people who are just transitioning from non-tech to a technical or just non-corporate to corporate careers, that they can find some support. And so with that, the challenge this week for you will be that before you send your next email or you have your next meeting, or you know what, even if you're chatting with your mom, like, if you're not working yet, like let's say you're chatting with your mom or you're chatting with your partner, your other half, whatever that is, just try to, as you're talking to them, just try to think about the story that you're going to share and think, what is that one sentence that this person absolutely needs to know? And initially you might feel like, oh, this is also important, that is also important, this is also important. Over time, your brain will start to help you think objectively about, wait, all of this is crap. You know what? I think only this one sentence is important. I think this one outcome or this one thing, hey, we need to fix the dishwasher. Why? And then you add the context. Because it's been going through, it's not washing the dishes properly and the cycle is flawed or whatever, right? But if you start off with, the dishes are not being washed properly and the spoons kind of fall over and this happened and that happened, the other person will, so what do you want really, right? So instead you can say, hey, I think we need to replace the dishwasher because, and then add your story. So keep practicing. I always say that I don't think this is like this is for people who really want to learn and grow. I'm not going to give you like a quick feel-good moment. I'm happy to make you feel good in a one-on-one conversation, but as a platform, I'm trying to give you real insight into my life, what helped me, and then also finding ways to help you rewire your brain over time. And please be patient with yourself. This is not going to happen overnight, right? As you keep working on yourself, keep working, your brain will start to rewire itself and you will start to subconsciously, naturally question yourself, right? That is how your brain works. So do that and then let me know in the comments if it worked for you. Let me know if you want to communicate with me. I try to read most of the comments and will try to communicate back with you. If there's a topic of interest you want me to talk about, please share that as well. But until then, stay brave, stay happy, stay healthy, because health, without health, none of this is gonna work. None of this is useful, right? Health is the most important. So be kind to yourself always. Take care of yourself, take care of your health, because health is the first. You may not realize that now, but trust me that your health is the most important thing. So without health, none of this is gonna be helpful or useful. So take care of yourself and see you again in another episode. Until then, have a good week and talk to you soon. Bye.